So back in the day when I would do a lot of repairs at stores, even run stores, we had to always come up with ways to make money that maybe the competition wouldn't be doing, whether it's like GameStop or other places. And one thing we figured out was that we could actually refurbish controllers. The 360 controller seemed to be probably the best bet, as it was the most popular controller at the time to buy, the wireless ones in particular. And they were actually fairly easy to refurbish. One of the biggest issues with those were controller stick drift, where if you're not touching the controllers, your character on screen or your viewpoint would just move as if the controller stick was slightly being pushed to the left or the right, and replacing those was a bit harder than what you can do now with your Joy-Con. In fact, you can actually see several controllers I have laid out right here, whether it's the Xbox One controller, the PS4 controller, or the Switch Pro controller. They all would suffer from drift at some point on different controllers, mostly because they all have joysticks. In fact, if it has a joystick, whether it's a system like the Vita, for example, or the 3DS, or a controller, it'll probably have some issue or malfunction on at least some of the units. It just seems to happen. Whether it's from dirt or just overall the control stick malfunctioning, it's a whole thing. But here's the good news. We're going to work on a Joy-Con controller today, and we're actually going to replace the stick. And the reason we're going to do that is, well, it's actually not that bad. In fact, I'm going to show you how to do it in the fewest steps possible. But first, we're going to go through a few things you can try before actually having to open this controller up. So the first thing you could try to do is, if you go into your options, you can actually go into controller options and go to calibrate. And that will allow you to try to calibrate the stick and help it kind of find its center point again, its resting position, because sometimes, for whatever reason, it will actually get off center. I've actually seen it before with one of my Joy-Con controllers, and after recentering it and calibrating it again, it hasn't had an issue since then. I'm not really sure why this happens or what causes it, but it is a thing, and, well, it's just software. So you do that, and it's good. Another thing you can try before we dive into this controller is you can actually try to clean around the joystick. See, sometimes dirt and dust and just whether it's skin particles or anything that kind of get in there as you're, of course, moving your character and playing your games, you can actually get some debris in there, and it will cause issue. What I recommend to do is get a soft bristle toothbrush and some compressed air. And what you want to do is spray some compressed air around the edges, move the joystick while you're doing this, and then take the soft bristle toothbrush, scrub kind of around it gently while you're also moving it, and then come back with the compressed air once again, just to kind of clean up any of the loose particles that may have been loosened by that toothbrush. Now, this can fix the issue, and sometimes it's temporary, other times it's permanent. And if it is temporary and you notice it again a week later, you can still try to clean it, but most likely it is an issue with the joystick, and unfortunately, cleaning it doesn't always fix it. And at that point, it's actually fairly cheap to just replace the joystick. How cheap? Well, you can get a brand new joystick for less than $10. It's brand new. I think on Amazon Prime, I think it was like $8 or something, maybe less, depending on if you look around. And this will actually replace this thumbstick completely. Today we're going to be replacing the left thumbstick, as this is the one that's probably going to get the most use, as it's generally in charge of moving your character around if you're playing, like Zelda or platforming games or anything. Usually you're going to use either this left stick or these D-pad buttons if you need to do that. A lot of people will end up using this left stick, so we're going to do this one, although the right Joy-Con is very similar. And again, I'm going to show you the least amount of steps in order to replace it, and we'll replace this one today. So hopefully it makes it so that you're a little more confident to replace it. And if you've already replaced your old Joy-Con controllers and they're sitting in a drawer, for the price of one of these, it's worth even taking a shot, as you might be able to revive a $50 controller with just this little part here. So the biggest reason why I think you can probably do this is, I mentioned 360 controllers earlier. Those joysticks are actually soldered to the board, and I could show you how to replace one of those as well down the road if you want, but that is a bit more advanced. It's really frustrating at times, because sometimes all the little pins you gotta do, one of them isn't desoldered completely, and you gotta push on and force. That's a whole thing. I replaced those quite a bit back in the day. What's great about a plug-in joystick is that you don't have to do any soldering. It just plugs in with that ribbon cable. And from what I've seen, these are interchangeable. So this works with the right or the left. A lot of listings will have that kind of put in the description, so double check that before you buy one of these to make sure it'll work for either one, but I believe all of them do. So you do need a tri-tipped screwdriver, which I have here for myself as usual, and then you also need a Phillips head screwdriver, which I also have. And we're going to start by opening this up. Now, if you watched the tutorial I did for changing out the metal locks, I told you guys before you want to be very, very careful when you remove these back screws. It is no joke, and you can strip them. So I recommend taking your time when you remove these, kind of give it some nice pressure and slowly turn. If you feel the screwdriver start to slip, back it out immediately, okay? And then come back to it and try again. Do not keep pushing and forcing. You will grind away at the center of the screw and it will no longer grip. So don't get too crazy with it. If it's not pushing, basically you're trying to break the screw free. And if it's not cooperating with you, kind of back it out, give it a second, and then come back and try to unscrew it. Fortunately, these ones, because I've already done it, they're pretty easy to get out. So I'm gonna go ahead and unscrew these 4 screws and then we'll open it up. All right, we got the screws out. Sometimes it's a bit sticky around here because different models will actually have a little bit of glue even in there sometimes, like a little sticker to kind of hold it down. Once you open it up, you wanna open it up from this side, okay? So the railing is over here. You wanna open it up from here because of course you have ribbon cables on this side here. Here's the beauty, we don't have to take these ribbon cables off to get to the joystick. So if you're concerned about these, don't be, just kind of set it down, okay? You don't have to rip this off or anything, just kind of leave it there. We do have to pull this battery out though, because there are screws underneath of the battery. So it does give you a little window here to kind of grip it. And we don't want to use anything metal. You can use plastic if you would like you could use like a business card, or you could use like an old credit card if you'd like. You can also just use your fingernail and kind of just jam it in there and pull up, and you'll actually start to kind of loosen it. Like mine popped right out because there actually wasn't that much of a sticker out here. It's actually at the bottom here, and then one at the top. So if you kind of come from this side, you can actually peel it up, and there you go. This guy is just going to sit over here. You can unplug it. You also don't have to, but if you unplug it, it will at least pull battery or at least power from this. However, you can also just kind of leave it hanging off. But if you'd like to, it does just kind of pull up carefully and it'll pop off. This connector just pushes right back down to that socket. It doesn't like slide in or push in like ribbon cable. It just kind of pushes down onto that. So it's actually very, very easy to put back in. And then we have a few screws here to take out. This is the plastics that actually covers up where the joystick is. So you take a Phillips head, we unscrew these 2 screws, and then we'll pull this off. You also have one more screw down here. So on this one, you do have to unscrew this one as well. There's 3 technically. So let's get that guy off. And then this might be the most challenging part for some people. However, they did at least give us a lot of slack for this. So let me go ahead and just turn this over and get these screws out of the way. They're all the same size, so we're good there. This is the button here for, of course, our ZL or ZR. It'll be different on either one. And it actually plugs into the board right here. So here's the thing. You technically don't have to unplug that if you're not comfortable with it because, of course, it's long enough to where you can just kind of move it over here. But it will give you more room to work if you do unplug it. How do we do that? Well, on the back here, we actually have this little black tab, and that actually pulls up away, okay? You don't have to pull very hard. You use your fingernail, it's very easy, and you just kind of pop it up, tiny amounts of force, seriously, not much. Once this is kind of up, almost at a 90-degree angle, closer to 45, I'd even say, this will just kind of pull away, and that guy's unplugged. Okay, very, very easy to do. At that point, I recommend to push that black tab back down. Again, not a ton of force, and at this point, we are right here where the joystick is. I'm gonna make one more recommendation because it's going to only help you here. You wanna unplug your, this is the minus button. The minus button is literally just plugged into the board right here. I recommend also unplugging that. It's just a ribbon cable. We're just gonna pull like the gray tab part, again, carefully, okay, with a fingernail, very, very carefully. It doesn't have to be a lot of force. You'll slowly pry it up. This guy then pulls out, and we now have access to both screws for our joystick, and we're good to go. So we have 2 screws for our joystick here. We have one at the top, one at the bottom, and all we have to do is start unscrewing them. We'll also have to unplug our joystick as well. So we're gonna go ahead and do that now. If you have changed your shell at all on your Joy-Con, this should be a piece of cake to do because you've already done all of this. But if you're new to this, this actually might be a good way to get you kind of acclimated with opening up your Joy-Con and getting down to this point because you're actually getting closer and closer to where we would be when you would start changing the shell out. Now there is a black kind of coating or like basically a cover on the bottom here. We're actually going to go ahead and unclip this side as well right here. This is for the Joy-Con. Again, a fingernail, very small amounts of force, and you should get this black clip up. So again, very, very easy to do. That's up. We're going to go ahead and I'm actually going to use some tweezers. You could obviously just grab that and pull it out of there, but I'm actually use some tweezers to help get this guy out. There we go. And now we have the joystick free. There is a, as I said before, kind of like this black almost piece of plastic, which you'll be able to see easier when I free this. Right there. And that's just acts as kind of a barrier to keep as much dirt and dust out as it can. But at this point, we are able to now put the new joystick in, which we will do. And then we can start plugging things in and closing it up. As you can see, it kind of fits in. And you want to put this, obviously, under this ribbon cable that we have now moved for the minus button. And then we're good to go. Let me get that screw out of there. And we'll be able to put this guy back in and start closing it up. I want to point out one other thing that might kind of get away from me here. This button up here, this is of course your R or L, depending on which one we're working on. It's spring-loaded, and at this point, because we have removed this plastic, it's actually able to be freed. So if you're working on this and this comes off, it's very possible that you could lose that spring. You could technically, when you get to this point, just take this off if you don't want to deal with it. But if you're careful enough around it, you should be okay. You could also put a piece of tape, like right here, just regular like Scotch tape, whatever, just that you would use. You just tape it right there, and it'll just hold that down if you're unsure about it kind of jumping away from you. Okay, new joystick in. We basically want to kind of get the thumbstick in and around the plastic that is kind of acting as a barrier, as we talked about before. You can pretty much just push in, and it'll drop right in. That's around there. At this point, it's in. So our new joystick is now installed. We have to plug it in on this side. We have to plug this guy in, screw it all in, and yeah, we're on our way. So I'm gonna go ahead and start putting this guy back together now. Now, when you plug these ribbon cables in, you wanna be very careful. I like using a pair of tweezers if it's kind of a tight fit. And essentially, you wanna make sure your tab is up on the other side if it's pushing in from the side here. So you have the black tab on this side, that's up right now. This just kind of pushes into the opening carefully. It doesn't have to go all the way in. You just need to make sure it's at least in contact. You press that down and it'll pretty much seal it. So that's actually in there now. A couple screws and our JoyCon joystick is installed. Something else I want to point out that might trip some people up. When you're going to plug your, this is what, ZL in this case. You're gonna have this ribbon cable here that kind of is twisted. You're not really sure which way it goes in. You wanna have those pins in the upright position so you're looking at them. Okay, like on here, so there's two different positions. You can have either the contacts pointed up while you're pushing in, or down. You want to actually have this cable pointing up for those contacts. It seems kind of weird because you're looking around and seeing all of them in the opposite way, but that's just the way Nintendo designed this Joy-Con for whatever reason. So you want to just have that with the clip, again, in the up position, and it'll just slide in on the outside there with the contacts facing up. So here's where I am now. I still have to put in these two screws. However, if I really want to, I can actually plug this battery in at this point, just kind of fold it over, and then I can just test it if I'd like to, because everything's screwed in, nothing's gonna fall out from here, and I can actually turn my switch on and test this joystick if I'd like, and then any other buttons, top or bottom, if I just want to make sure everything's plugged in correctly. If this is your first time doing it, I actually recommend that. That way you don't have to go back through the steps of unscrewing these back screws that may have been a real pain for you to get out. So that's what I would do if this is your first time. You're not going to hurt anything by just kind of folding this over with the battery sitting in there and plugged in, and you just grip it obviously and move it around just to make sure. All right, so battery's pressed in there. When we go to fold this back over, remember, you want these ribbons to be kind of bent like this. Do you see that, where it kind of folds in? So it's not folding out, so you don't have these kind of sticking out like that, because otherwise you will close it on it. You want these to be bent in. They're already kind of bent that way, so it shouldn't be an issue. The railing kind of slides in on the side. You just want to kind of play around with it to make sure everything kind of clicks in, all right? And then you'll be able to squeeze it closed, and you'll get a nice little click when that happens. And look at that, it's flush. It's good. You could put technically one screw in the back, or at this point you could just test it like I said. I'm gonna put those few screws in, and then we'll actually turn the switch on right here and test it out. Okay, so here we are with the switch. Here's the old joystick, and then of course the new one is now installed in here. And you can see it kicking around pretty well right now, but let's go down to settings. Everything looks good on the calibration front, because we can calibrate our control sticks. We can make sure it has a good center point, which it does. We can move it around, of course, and just make sure it resets the center. There we go, look at that. Looks good. Sometimes when you're, if there is drift, you'll see it you'll be like that, right? You want it to have these lines all lit up right there. This one looks to be doing that. So, successful repair, I would say. Well, actually this one wasn't drifting anyway, so, but if this was a drifting joystick, I would say this is a successful repair. it looks good. And this is, I guess, would be considered worst case scenario, of course, where you have a joystick that just will not continue working or stop drifting even after cleaning, or you clean it and then a week later, a month later, it comes back. It's not a bad repair. This would have taken me about 10 to 15 minutes if I wasn't kind of doing step by step and trying to walk through as best I could. This is something that even somebody who has never opened one of these before, maybe at the most half an hour to 40 minutes if you're really taking your time. So I think, yeah, if you have a pair that's, or just one that's messed up and you put it away and you got a new one, you probably have a good working Joy-Con controller that wouldn't cost much to fix. $8, $9 and an hour of your time maybe at the most. So I say it's worth going back and checking out and replacing that joystick if you can, because it's, of course, not too bad to do. I hope this helped you out, though, guys. If it did, make sure to hit the like button. It does help out. And, well, hopefully that helps you replace your joystick and revive a Joy-Con, or fix one that's just been aggravating you in, like, Zelda or something. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.